Just a little while ago, I received a call from Senator Phil Berger. He was letting me know that he was going to concede in the race.
State Senate leader Phil Berger officially concedes to Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page after a second recount shows no change in their primary. On WRAL, you'll hear from Page after his historic victory.
It's cool today, but another warm-up is on the way when we could see near record heat and the next front bringing storms and a weekend cool down.
And the new changes to aviation safety after that deadly crash between a plane and Black Hawk helicopter in D.C. last year.
My goodness, here we go. The most powerful Republican in North Carolina unseated in the primary. Senator Phil Berger conceding to Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page today.
23 vote difference. Rockingham and Guilford's hand recounts today yielded no changes in that margin. This has been a huge topic in the 7 p.m. inbox over the past few weeks. Please do keep sending in your questions and your feedback, 7 p.m. at WRAL.com. We'll try to get to a few emails at the end of the newscast, so keep those emails coming.
Yeah, let us know what you think. There have been so many layers to this story. Berger, we should mention, was endorsed by Trump. He represented the Rockingham area for 25 years and has led his chamber for 15 of them.
Meantime, Page has been sheriff in Rockingham County for 28 years. Here's what he said during a news conference today.
It doesn't seem real. I knew that it was going to come, but I just didn't know when. And so that waiting and anticipating.
So let's bring you now to Rockingham County. Let's go out there and talk to WRL's Caroline Yaffa. She has been one of our reporters covering this story from the very beginning.
Yeah, Caroline, give us a sense of how both sides are responding here. We just heard from Sam Page. That was part of your interview that you did this afternoon.
Well, Ashley and Dan, Phil Berger conceded this afternoon, and he put an end to a tight Republican primary today. Now, he said in an email statement, he said, in quote, "Looking ahead, I remain committed to working with my colleagues in the short session to ensure North Carolina continues to be the best state in the nation. I will also do everything I can to support all Republican Senate candidates and protect our supermajority." So he's referring to the upcoming session that's starting April 21st. And we also learned that Berger personally called Page. He spoke to Page, and then afterwards we spoke to Berger, we spoke to Page, and Page told me that moment doesn't feel real, and his wife said that this is an emotional time for all of them.
Members upon the motion of Senator Jay Chipman, also Kate.
So Page says the waiting is now over. He's ready to move forward toward November. And his wife said something that people don't know about him is he's a straight thinker, and he's excited to get into the legislature if he wins his November race against the Democrat that he is facing.
Let's talk about the timeline here, Caroline. Election day was almost a month ago. You know, this has been a long road, but it really could have been even longer. We've seen other races where the courts get involved. Not this time, no. Give us a bit of a cliff notes, if you will, of how we got here.
So, Ashley, Election Day was about 20 days ago. It was March 3rd, and Berger and Page were in a tight race. It only separated 2 votes. Now, that's before military, overseas, and provisional ballots came in. So once those were recorded and counted by election officials, there was that 23-vote margin that separated the 2. Then afterwards, Berger called for a recount. So there was a machine recount that counted all ballots in that election. Then there was no change in the 23-vote margin. Then today there was a hand recount where 3 precincts, and 5% of the ballots in that race were counted, and again there was no margin. So that was a big change in that race compared to seeing other different races. There has not been a huge recount like this in a couple of years, and it's not very common, but both campaigns set up legal defense funds, which proves that they were thinking this could maybe go to court and could have potential legal challenges in the future, but obviously not anymore.
Both of these guys have been in the public eye for a long time. They've obviously known each other for a long time. When you spoke with Sam Page, did he give you a sense of what that phone call was like when they spoke?
Yeah, Ashley, as I mentioned, they did talk on the phone before Berger conceded in a statement, and Page talked about that they had a good relationship. He talked about how he respected him as his senator. He talked about how the conversation was respectful, and they shared some good conversations, and Berger was very kind to him on that call. In our phone call and during our interview, Page said something that was interesting that stuck out to me as well. He said that a lot of people, when he first said he was going to run, they were a little nervous about that. They said that Berger has a long history, as you mentioned, Dan, 15 years as leader and 20 plus years in the legislature. They were worried about getting that support behind Page.
Yeah, even President Trump called him trying to dissuade him from running, saying, hey, come to Washington, D.C., I'll give you a job there. But he said, no, I'm going to do this. And look what happened. Caroline Yaffa, live in Rockingham County. Thank you.
Page clearly did what he wanted to do. I want to bring in WRAL State Government reporter Paul Smay now. I don't think we can really underscore how much of a shakeup this is going to have, the power dynamics involved here in the North Carolina legislature. Berger has been the Senate leader there since 2011, a very well-known name. How do you think this all happened? How did he lose this race?
Well, he spent a lot of money trying to save himself. But it was, Page mentioned a moment back in 2023 when the state, including Phil Berger, considered putting a casino in Rockingham County. And Page said that's what upset a lot of people in that district. Now, the district includes Rockingham and Guilford counties, but in Rockingham, we see from the election results that Page outperformed Berger. He had twice as many votes as Berger. And he said, although they didn't go forward with that casino in 2023, a lot of resentment built up over the years, over time, with Berger considering that project. And he said today in interviews that's really what propelled his win.
Okay, so Sheriff Page is now moving into the legislature. What can we expect from him? You know, Senator Berger has the connections, has the experience there, and he has the friends. Is Page going to be popular when he enters the building? Because there are a lot of people there, as Ashley mentioned a moment ago, a lot of Republicans all the way up to the President of the United States were saying, hey, keep Berger where he is, and Sam Page ousts him. So this is somebody from his own party. What's it going to be like when he walks in the door?
Well, first, he has to win the general election this November. There is a Democrat in the race. His name's Steve Luking. We expect Page to win that just because the district leans so Republican. But you're right. When he does, as expected, get to Raleigh, most of the people in power and leadership positions, like the whip and the majority leader and people like that, they're Berger allies. So don't expect Page to just come in and get a leadership position on any high-powered committees. He's probably going to be what they call a backbencher for a little while.
So what happens here now? You know, Berger still remains Senate leader. He still has the rest of his term to play out here. That's right.
If his caucus wanted to, they could get rid of him tomorrow. But I suspect they won't. And that's because he has so many allies there. And Berger's spokesman told me today he still has a lot of things he wants to get done in the remaining, 9 months of his term. And so I imagine that the people there in that Senate caucus will let him keep the gavel, at least for the remainder of the year.
And then we'll see who lobbies to get it next.
Probably one of his friends.
Right. We'll see. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. WRAL's NC Capitol team has been on top of this from the very beginning. Find all the reporting on WRAL.com and on the WRAL YouTube page.
And now that this race is over, and keep in mind, we've still got to get through the November general, but what more questions do you have about it? Send us an email, 7 p.m. at WRAL.com. This is something that lots of you have emailed about over the past few weeks. We want to get you some answers. Tell us what's on your mind. We may even get to a few emails at the end of this newscast. So get your phones out, send us an email while you're watching. Brian?
Some breaking news right now that we're following in the WRAL Live Center. A pretty bad crash in the southern part of Harnett County. I want to show you some video that Sky 5 shot only about 30 minutes ago. This is in the Anderson Creek community on 210 at Overhills. And you can see it looks like maybe at least 3 vehicles involved in this crash. Working to find out more details about injuries in this. Just checked with the DOT and it looks like at least one lane of 210 has reopened as that investigation continues.
Brian, thanks. A whole lot more to talk about in the news tonight.
These are the 5 things that you should should know right now. Troops from Fort Bragg are going to the Middle East. Fox News and the Wall Street Journal both reporting that the 82nd Airborne is being deployed to the region as that conflict with Iran continues. 3,000 troops will be deployed, members of the Brigade Combat Team. That is that rapid response unit. They can go anywhere in the world within 18 hours. An official announcement from the Pentagon is expected in the coming days. A Raleigh man is accused of impersonating a police officer, then forcing someone into unwanted sexual contact after a fake traffic stop. Court documents showing that 33-year-old Meredith Cromartie has done this before, we should say. 6 arrests, in fact, in 10 years, all for impersonating law enforcement. This most recent incident happened last week on Capitol Boulevard. Cromartie did turn himself in.
We are learning more about the 14-year-old hit by a police cruiser in Fuquay Varina. This happened yesterday evening on Church Street. Axel Henderson is recovering at home today. The crash fractured both his eye sockets and he has quite a lot of bruises. The Fuquay Varina Police Department wrote in a statement that their primary concern is for the well-being of everyone involved. Highway Patrol is investigating. How about Epic Games saying it's laying off 1,000 workers as it adjusts to slow sales tied to Fortnite? The Cary-based company says the cuts are on top of $500 million in other cost cuts. The company has offices across the Americas. It wasn't immediately clear how many of those cuts would be at its Cary headquarters. Expect closures in downtown Raleigh this week. Crews will be working to get the Raleigh Convention Center back to regular operations. You know, it's been nearly 4 months since it caught on fire. New cooling elements will arrive tomorrow to replace the temporary equipment they've been using. A crane will be set up on McDowell Street April 1st. More change could be on the way to improve aviation safety.
New rules for pilots, air traffic controllers, and more, all in response to this. You remember the plane crash in Washington, D.C. last year. We're going to get some details and look at what actually happened here, what we know now, and talk about what's being done to make sure it doesn't happen again. Kat?
After a cold start this morning, we're going to be warming right back up. I'll let you know when we could see some rain to help with the pollen coming up.
More than a year after a military helicopter collided with a passenger plane in Washington, D.C., changes to aviation safety are on the way. You'll remember this video from last year. How can you forget it, right? An Army Black Hawk helicopter collided with an American Airlines flight. Everyone on board both aircraft died, including the helicopter pilot, Rebecca Lobach, a woman who grew up in Durham. One of her friends has spent the last year dispelling rumors online about what happened that day in D.C. It's gotten pretty nasty on social media. WRAL Investigates Megan Cloherty spoke to her about this and dug into the official report on the crash.
This is the NTSB's video showing what Lobach saw from the UHL-60 Blackhawk. The green circle shows her view using night goggles, and the distant aircraft circled in pink is the American Airlines flight, heading straight toward her. The final crash report from the NTSB released last month points to a number of causes. The fact the FAA placed the helicopter route too close to the runway approach path. Air traffic control's tendency to rely on pilots' judgment of their separation from other aircraft. A faulty altimeter that led the helicopter crew to believe they were flying 100 feet lower, and the helicopter crew not keeping visual separation from the plane.
And I think the most important thing of this entire takeaway is that if we point the blame at one person, then we completely miss what we can change and what we can prevent in the future.
Megan, Celeste says there's so much that we have to consider. The FAA has just recently already made changes. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it just went into effect last week. And part of the reason that these went into effect is because there were another 2 misses, near misses. It happened at DCA, it could have happened again, and the administration essentially says, whoa, let's get a handle on this. One of the FAA mandates that is now in effect is that the air traffic control can no longer rely on pilots alone to make sure they have visual separation from other aircraft. So they're saying, hey, you have to use radar. There was a near miss at San Antonio Airport on February 27th. There was a near miss at Hollywood Burbank on March 2nd. I mean, these are happening.
Yeah.
And so it's really an emphasis to make sure just at the basic level, we have distance, both vertically and horizontal distance between aircraft.
Okay, that's for the pilots.
Yes.
Air traffic controllers, this is a big part of it too. The NTSB came out with a whole bunch of recommendations. What's in that recommendation list?
50 recommendations from the NTSB came out at the end of January, and we've been waiting for it for a year, which actually is a relatively quick turnaround for the NTSB. Lawmakers took those 50 recommendations and made legislation out of them, and it was almost like a copy-paste. We realized we need to overhaul aviation safety in this country. Here are the 50 recommendations. Let's get to work. It has now been introduced into Congress. Some of those recommendations are having a broader use of collision avoidance systems, which is in existence. It's just a lot of places don't use it yet. So they're saying we need to make sure that's in every air traffic control. Aircraft must be equipped with collision mitigation. The military must be transparent and broadcast their locations if they're near major airports, which apparently was not happening before. And a reassessment of helicopter routes. And, in this case, seeing how close they were and they weren't reassessed, and this is what led us there.
That is called the Alert Act, the legislation that you were talking about. Is there anything in the Alert Act that may have prevented what we saw at LaGuardia this week?
They're focusing on staffing. That's one of the points that I saw. They want more air traffic controllers on every shift. And keep in mind, air traffic control isn't just what's in the air. They're making sure what's on the ground is also safe. So it brings us back to LaGuardia and the fire truck that crossed paths with the plane. They have to also make sure that the taxiing runways, the tarmac, everything is clear. So if you have more people, the idea being trained people who know what they're doing will have a generally safer experience at the airport, which is already the safest form of transportation.
Yeah, exactly. Megan, thank you. You can find more of Megan's conversation with the pilot's friend on the WRAL YouTube page. She talks about her crusade to set the record straight on social media. But we should wrap up by mentioning flying is still the safest way to travel. It's safer than walking down the street, right? Researchers at MIT found the risk of dying from commercial air travel is 1 in 13.5 million. That's up from 1 in 350,000 in the 1970s. But those numbers might not make you feel any safer, especially after seeing the video in New York this week, the video in D.C. last year. But it's that anxiety that makes flying so much safer than any other type of travel. I'm going to borrow, Dan, from you in one of your in-depth segments. Dan said, you're in a tube flying above the clouds at 600 miles per hour. And that is the safest way to travel because that is insane. And we know it. And that's why we demand perfection, constantly updating standards, oversight, tech, and training. I'm curious what you think about this. Send us an email, 7 p.m. at WRAL.com. What else do you want us to talk about here on the news? Tell me what's on your mind, and we're going to cover it here at 7 o'clock.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. Kat Campbell joining us now. So a little cooler today. That was definitely noticed. I'm still noticing the pollen out there as well. Do the cooler temperatures help with that at all?
Not really. I mean, now that it's already present, we're not necessarily adding a lot more pollen to the air today, but we had the windy conditions, the warm conditions yesterday. So we jumped up a little bit, actually not as much as I thought we would, just given how windy it was yesterday for all that pollen to kind of pour out of the trees, but it's still very high. Pollen count today, pine, oak, birch, walnut, and maple all showed up for tree pollen types. Of course, tree pollen is high today, and you're probably wanting to know when we've got some rain coming to help wash it away. To be fully transparent here, I washed off my deck today because I am not counting on a good pollen busting rain here anytime soon. Friday, we've got the chance for rain and storms. This does not look like a big washout kind of a rain to really help clear things out. So hopefully it'll help cleanse the air a bit, but you may just want to go ahead and start washing some stuff off on your porch so you don't track it inside. You'll need to do it a couple more times, though. That's the caveat. Looking ahead Friday evening, we've got some showers, perhaps a rumble of thunder closer to 5 o'clock. This model may be a little on the early side here, but the better chance for rain is still likely to come late Friday evening and into Friday night. It still looks like that'll be out of here, though, by the time we get to the weekend. It'll just be a lot colder by the time we get to the weekend. Let's take a look at our high-resolution in-house futurecast model. The new model run is in, and it shows even less rain for Friday. So it really drives home the point that this is not going to be a big pollen-busting rain for us. And you can see that not just with our in-house model, but the American model, the European model as well. If you do have prom pictures happening on Friday, come on out to the WRAL Azalea Gardens. We've got a lot in bloom for you to see. It's going to be warm temperatures in the mid-80s as the school lets out. Once we get later into the evening, there's about a 30% chance of rain. And as we near sunset, that chance goes up to 40%. And then temperatures plummet after Friday's rain chances with the cold front. We go back down to 58 for the high Saturday, 35 that night. The threat of a frost, maybe a light freeze Saturday night into Sunday morning. Then we bounce right back up. We're going to be back up near 80 for the Bulls home opener next Tuesday. I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be a good one. Thank you, Kat. All right, stick around, everybody. Tonight's One Last Thing is next, and we're going to go through the 7 p.m. inbox, answer some of your feedback next. For our One Last Thing tonight, let's talk about some of your feedback. People writing into 7 p.m. at WRAL.com. These are from the inbox. Evelyn writing in, how much money does Berger have in the bank, and what can he do with it legally? So we haven't really gotten any updated reports or any numbers on the money in the war chest. We do know they have raised millions of dollars, but whatever Berger does have left, he can farm out to other Republicans to help them win their elections and try and help keep Republicans in the supermajority. Don't forget, these are the primaries. We still have the general election coming
He
up.
actually said that he was going to do that in the statement today, his
Right.
concession statement. Hey, a viewer named Gary made a pretty good point here. He wrote, anyone who thinks Berger is going away should reconsider that position. He will still have a lot of influence. Let's not forget that his son is a justice on the state Supreme Court. Yeah, if you didn't know that, Phil Berger is senior. Phil Berger Jr. is on the state Supreme Court.
We'll wait to see what Phil Berger wants to do next. 7 p.m. at WRAL.com. Great to have you with us.